NACDL is the association of the nation's criminal defense bar.
So hello everyone, this is my only second Zoom presentation, so we're going to keep it in prayer that this remains right. So we're going to talk about Cross-Examination 101 and continuing the story of innocence. My business partner and I named it that because I'm sure, as you have probably heard from other speakers, what we do all wrapped into theory and storytelling is extremely important, and cross-examination plays a huge role in that. Normally, after the direct, the jury is looking at us like one of my faves, Auntie Maxie. They are unpleased, right? The government has given them this particular version of things, and they are looking at us like, what could you possibly say to change my mind? Our goal, if we do cross-examination right, is to have them look more like this, almost be cheering us to the end after we finish our cross. Or perhaps looking at the government completely confused as to why they would make up these horrible allegations against our lovely clients, or looking at them very pleased as though, let's just hurry up and get to voting so that I can send this person home. Or just, this is dumb and I probably should have rejected jury selection. Either one of those things. In order to do that, though, ladies and gentlemen, we have to control and dominate in cross-examination. And just like all the other pieces of a case, cross is still very much part of our story. So why is storytelling a part of cross-examination and what we do as trial lawyers? So here's a clip. The setup for this is a scene from a movie from 1997 called Amistad. And it is about a boat of slaves that make it to the United States, and they are trying to be recognized as citizens. Morgan Freeman and eventually I think it's Matthew McConaughey, one of these people, end up taking on their cause. But this scene is about Morgan Freeman going in to get some advice on how to try his case. Let's hope this works.
Sir.
Yeah?
Mr. President, if it was handling the case.
Well, it isn't me, and thank God for that.
But if it was, sir.
What is their story?
Why, they're from West Africa?
No. What is their story? Mrs. Jolson, you're from where originally?
Why, Georgia, sir.
Georgia.
Yes, sir.
Does that pretty much sum up what you are? A Georgian? Is that your story? No. You're an ex-slave who's devoted his life to the abolition of slavery and overcoming great obstacles and hardships along the way, I should imagine. That's your story, isn't it? You and this young so-called lawyer have proven you know what they are. They're Africans. Congratulations. What you don't know, and as far as I can tell haven't bothered them the least to discover, is who they are. Right?
So for anybody who couldn't necessarily hear it, I'll just recap it for you. Morgan Freeman is going and trying to get advice on how to present his case. And he's saying, you know, like, how should I do this? And he says, you have to tell the story. And he asks Morgan Freeman sort of where he is. And Morgan Freeman gives him some very basic facts, right? Some non-interesting kind of flat facts. And the person takes those facts and flips it, right? It makes it a very visual and sort of a huge impactful powerful, emotionally story piece of what he's trying to present. There's no different in anything that we do in openings, crosses, directs, closings. We're always trying to add to our story. So we prosecutors might get to pick the actors, right? Because they get to have whatever they're going to present. But as defenders, we get the chance through our cross to change the scene. We're almost like, if you like theater or movies or shows, we're the real life production staff. How we do things can change the lighting, the sets, the sound, the costumes, the whole crew. And that's our sort of job as we step into cross. So how do you do it? Shout out to one of my faves, Janet Jackson. It is all about control. You have to figure out the best way to control the evidence that is going to be coming through. What does control mean? Simply put, according to Webster's, it's to direct the behavior of the person, right? To cause the person to do what you want. You're going to learn how to control by your questions. You're going to control by knowing the facts better. And you're going to control by impeaching the witness. Those are our tools. That's how we master and are masters at cross-examination. So we kind of broke this down into a 3-level process for you. Shout out to Black Panther because I love everything about Wakanda. All right, the first area is going to deal with the brainstorming, and we're going to talk about all the things you need to do and gather in that process. Then we're going to talk about the actual preparation, how you're going to get those questions ready to go in, and then the actual execution, when you basically go in with the knife for the kill. So you start first with the brainstorming. No different than I'm sure you all have talked about in theory, what you talk about as you plan for a direct. You just don't wake up one morning and decide you're going to do a cross. You spend some time thinking about that cross and brainstorming. You have to decide the theory of the case. I heard that you all heard from my amazing friend, Ali Bloomquist, who I love. And hopefully she said her little phrase that she should probably patent, which is theory is everything. It literally is. So you have to decide the theory of your case. What are we saying? That theory, remember, is your little short paragraph, what summarizes your not guilty. That thing that has the emotional and compelling component that if someone said to you, tell me about your case, you could give it to them in that nice, concise, succinct way and get it out. If any part of your cross-examination does not advance your case theory, hear me now, get it out of here. And I'll tell you why I picked this clip after I play it.
They want Yuppie off the Dodger dugout. He's bugging the Dodger players, and third base umpire Bob Davidson is throwing Yuppie out of the ballgame. We've seen it all now, huh? How
So I picked that clip because everybody loves the mascot. The mascot is wonderful, and he's fun, and he's cute, and he's cuddly, and kids like him. And sometimes in our cases, we latch onto certain facts. We're like, I love it. I love this fact. But if it's not advancing your theory the way that that mascot was not helping in that baseball game, it's got to get out of here. So spend time with understanding that all the facts that you might spend time pulling out, if it doesn't advance your theory, it goes, because theory really is everything. All right, now let me make sure I'm doing this right. Okay. Uh-oh, hold on. Of course, it's stuck. Hold up, there it is. All right. That's all right? Yeah, okay. Now, step 2, you want to decide who this witness is going to be in this cross. Is there a way that this witness can be used to help us tell the story that's been decided by our theory? In order to do that, you have to spend some time understanding who each witness really is. They're not just blank names on a page. You have to decide what's their personal agenda in relation to your case and how can you exploit it. When you're starting thinking about your witnesses, right? So you can start with the premise that most witnesses want to act consistently with their self-beliefs. So you gotta spend some time in the brainstorming section thinking about who this person is in their home life, in their work life, socially, on Instagram, Facebook, Are there any differences in those things, right? We all have that person that we're like, oh my God, that person is so funny on Instagram, but you might see them out and they're like super, super quiet. You're like, what is that? Are they only comfortable because they were behind a screen? Maybe. Those are the things that we need to look into and why. You're going to think about how do they feel about what they're there to testify about. How do they want other people to see them? Are they there because they want the prosecutor to love them? Is there some type of favor that they're doing for the victim? Maybe that's in the case. So you want to think about those things. How do they want to appear and be seen for themselves, right? We've all had that case with that witness that is so proud of being like the neighborhood watch person, and they want to be known in the community as that. What's their fear, right? Is this a snitch, perhaps, that is nervous about going to jail or losing their own freedom? And you also really want to think about how they're going to cooperate with us in the courtroom. Brandy and I learned very early, we thought that the police officers, for instance, were going to be hostile with us because we often look at ourselves as on the opposite side of the page. What we quickly learned is that they've trained these officers to testify. So sometimes they come across super duper passive, and if we're being too aggressive, that gets lost in the mix of what we're trying to do and are not effective. So you want to think about all these things. Thinking about this gives us the opportunity to use the government's witness as our own. Sometimes we want Officer Friendly to look efficient and strong and about his business because, for instance, if that bag of drugs had been on the ground, Officer Friendly would have seen that. Sometimes, though, like our lovely officer from The Simpsons, we want them to look completely like bumbling idiots. The only way we make those very conscious and strategic decisions that are wrapped into our theory is if we take the time in brainstorming to figure out who this witness is and how and if they advance our theory. Once we decide who they are, you can develop a theory of that witness. Every witness is not going to be the same. Some witnesses are just straight out lying, and you'll spend some time thinking about why that's the case. Sometimes, though, the very nice neighbor who happened to be outside and saw the end results of something just might be mistaken about what they identified about. Sometimes people just might be wrong. What they said was happening, you're going to be able to prove just wasn't even there at that time. Some officers or people are going to be careless or negligent in their job. So you really want to just think about what's your theory of that particular witness. As you start to do that, here's some suggestions of ways to discredit them depending on their theory. So let's say you have a lying witness. Well, we know you're always going to want to look for the bias. You, as the cross-examiner, are going to have to pull that out. The government's never going to highlight for them that this particular witness has a relationship with them or the client, because they don't really want that jury to know that. You want them to know that. They need to be exposed on their bias. So start thinking about who this lying witness is. Do they have certain relationships with the government? Are they always testifying for this particular prosecutor? Are they cool with the same detective, and so they always manage to be a witness in his cases? You want to look at what's their motive to lie. For some people, it just might be the witness fee that they get. For some people, it might just be, I like coming down to court and feeling important. Some, it might be, I hate your client, and so I'm lying because I want him to go away from something that happened 20 years ago. You're going to use things like their prior convictions, right? You're going to use things like prior statements that they have made, prior reports taken perhaps by other officers. I love impeaching officers with their report versus, for instance, what a crime scene officer might have documented, right? You can always play off those two. And prior testimonies. It's always great if you have grand jury transcripts, or if it's a police officer, perhaps from your prelim or bond hearing, things that you can use to show that they're lying. With a mistaken witness, you might be looking at things like how to challenge their actual perception, right? How do they relate to the event? Anybody who really knows me knows that I love glasses, and I probably have too many pairs in life. But for me, they're also necessary because if I take these glasses off, I cannot see 3 feet in front of me, right? So you want to be able to challenge things like, what was that person's ability to see their eyesight? Was something in front of them? Were they on their phone texting, heard a noise, and then looked up, right? Their perception will be different. All of that adds to the fact that they could just be mistaken about what they say they saw. You'll still use prior statements, you'll still use other inconsistencies, and never forget about the stress of the event. I don't know about y'all, but I have been in situations where I've heard gunshots. I didn't stand up and look and say, let me get an idea of who's standing over there and who's holding the gun and who's moving that way. I bent my head and I got out of Dodge, right? And so you want to think about those things, because all that goes into ways you can cross and discredit that actual witness. And step 3 under brainstorming, you want to think about what the goal of the cross is. Remember I said if it doesn't advance your theory, it's going to be out of there. So all the knowledge in the world doesn't matter if we don't actually know how to use it. So you might get answers to a number of these things, but how does it work and how does it relate in advancing your theory? Never forget, on cross, you are trying to obtain facts that support your defense. You are trying to obtain facts that you're going to use in your closing. You are trying to discredit the witness. You don't decide those things the day of trial when you stand up. Because you will have spent time with your theory, because you will have thought about who that witness is and what they bring to your case, you will have decided on those things before. Cross is not sometimes about us lawyers getting up there and being fancy for the cameras or whoever and showing out. We have goals, and so you never want to forget that as you're processing. So we spent our time, we've thought about it, we've read every police report, we're like, all right, now let's prep. How are we going to take all this theory and knowledge that we have and get ready? You're going to make chapters. Some people call them, what does someone say, titles. I don't really care what you call them. Here's the theory that I want you to take from this. A chapter is really just your roadmap. It's one sort of subject matter that you use for each thing that you're going to cross on. So you might have a chapter that's like, witness 1 was drunk at the time that happened. You'll list some questions for that. Witness 2 was, witness 2 also just really doesn't like my client. And you'll have some questions with that. What that serves to be for you is a roadmap for your fact finders. As you're going through those chapters, sort of the way we read books, the kind of the way on Netflix we watch episodes and it goes from episode 1 to episode 2 and it has a different theme for each. That's really what the chapters do. And they provide a roadmap for people to be able to follow. It makes sense as well because it's how we think. As humans, we can think that we're as smart as we want to, but we learn by how we break things down. People are able to absorb more when you can break them into as small pieces as possible and give it to them that way. So that's why chapters are helpful. And they also serve as pieces of your story. This is just a sample. If I said to someone, go cook rice, all of us could probably go in their kitchen and cook rice the way we think rice should be cooked. But if you've ever looked at the side of a box of rice, the instructions are completely detailed. You know why? Because that's how people process. So you literally have to tell people like, boil water, add salt, pour the water, use this, put it in it, right? Step by step. How we do a cross is no different. And it really helps people absorb and take it all in. This is an example of what happens when we don't break things down. This was a label on someone's medication. It says take every night before food, once daily, to be taken 4 times a day, 3 times a day, every 3 times daily, take 1, take 2, take 3, 1 or 2. I have no idea what they want me to do. This feels like a math problem to me. I will never understand it this way, but this is not how the human brain thinks. And if you are that smart and you think that way, that's wonderful for you. Your jurors, I promise you, don't think like this. So we're gonna do it in baby steps so that they can absorb all the information. Chapters also help us anticipate and organize how this is going to go. It helps us decide if we want to be informational with our fact finder or if we immediately want to be confrontational. I'm going to jump out there and say, at least for most crosses in the beginning, we start very informational. It takes the witness off guard. If you just start with like, now, Officer Jones, you've been an officer 7 years in this department. You first came in as a patrol officer. You then became a detective, right? I now look to the jury like she knows the process. That is helpful. Officer Jones is like, I don't really know what she's doing with this. I thought she was about to yell at me, and yet she's asking me questions that make him feel good, and he wants to provide that information. So sometimes we do that and we load the witness in before we go in for the strike. With a snitch, though, differently. It might be completely different. You might start off completely confrontational with, now, Mr. Jones, let's be clear, you just don't want to go to jail, right? Immediately, he's going to react that way. Your fact finder's like, whoa, what is he going to say in relation to that? So chapters help us decide which way to organizationally get ourselves together. Wait, did I do that right? Yeah. Okay. So, leading questions only in cross. If you've ever taken a cross questions with me, you know sometimes I throw things at you if you don't do a leading question. Just kidding. Not going to do that anymore. Also, we're on Zoom, so I can't do that. But leading questions only. You are basically going to declare your statement. The example that we have here is you went to the bar. I'm saying it. I'm telling the witness. That's exactly what you did, right? If I give you an open-ended of, did you go to the bar? You're going to get some smart witness who is like, what do you mean? I mean, when did I guess, well, which day? Which day did I go to the bar? I mean, again, that takes our control aspect out of it. So we're only going to do leading questions. We're not going to do the who, what, when, where, how, please explain, did you? Because that gives them an opportunity to talk, and that's not what cross is for. If we are controlling, we're going to lead only with our questions. Next, 1 fact per question. No compounds, right? My training director used to try to tell me to try to keep my questions to 6 to 8 words. Now, I kept being like, how is that possible? I mean, it's going to feel like I'm speaking to a kid. That's exactly the point. Because you want it to be small so that they can absorb it. And if you give them compact questions, they're going to answer it, but you're not going to know which part they're answering, right? And later, when you're going to want to argue something, the government or your fact finder is going to say, well, I don't know if he was saying yes to that part of your question or the other. So small questions, keep it right where you need it to be. You want to prepare facts and not conclusions. We all have seen the lovely movies where like the lawyer gets into the groove and they're so excited, and then they ask that one question too many. That is the conclusion of what you're trying to get to. So you will have done a beautiful cross showing that the witness was mistaken, and it never fails. Some lawyer says, and that's because, man, you were mistaken about what you saw. Well, the witness is never going to give you that, right? I know Jack Nicholson and them make it seem like they always are going to end up confessing and being like, you're right, you can't handle the truth. It's never going to happen. I mean, maybe once in my 20 years, but that's it, right? Conclusions are for closing. So as you are writing your crosses, if you get to the bottom of that cross and feel yourself tempted to write that conclusion question of like, that's because you suck as a witness, or that's because you'll do anything to get out, pump the brakes, stop yourself. Circle that in your cross. You're going to come back and you're going to use that line in your closing. When you can say that conclusively to the jury that, ladies and gentlemen, you know all he was trying to do to get out was snitch on the client. You know how you know? Because he told you. He told you that he was getting a benefit. He told you that, and their brain will almost start as a checklist. They're like, that's right, she did ask some questions about that. And they'll go with you where you need them to go. Chapters give you the opportunity to decide the order that is most effective for your storytelling, right? We all know stories need to have something good in the front. You put the fluff in the middle, and you want to end strong where you can. People always also remember the first questions that were asked. So you want to do something that's powerful, something that at least gets them on board, wanting them to pay attention. Chapters help you organize that. Just sort of a preparation way. I unfortunately, forgive me, universe, kill trees when I write across because I put one chapter on one sheet of paper every month. What that does is as I'm preparing and I'm finished writing everything out, I can literally move the sheets in the order that I feel is helpful. If I'm listening to a witness and all of a sudden that witness on direct has said something that maybe I wasn't going to start with that, but I like it and it's a little stronger, I can literally, as I'm sitting there, take that sheet, move it to the top of my pile. That helps you be able to organize and really have an effective flow as to how you go through your process. I said this already. I'll say it again. Write it out. I know we are in the age of like iPads and like computer stuff. Here's the thing. Just do me a favor. Do a few. If you're one of those people who's like, I know the chapter, I'm just going to go in. Just be like, HP would want me to at least try this a little bit. Writing it out gives you a huge strength. Now, you might, by the time you end up in court, know it so well that your notes are on the podium, you are in your zone, and you're going and you don't need it. But the reason you'll get there is because you've written it out. You can't get off paper until you've been on. It also helps for newer lawyers, and I'm not even going to say newer lawyers, myself included. I like to make sure every step and every line of an impeachment, I've made sure it's right? So if I need to know the line and page, writing it out helps me make sure that I have it. Doesn't mean that you're going to read it, but it's in there. It also then allows you to listen. I can't tell you how many times we've written across, it's sitting there in front of me, I'm listening to the witness direct, and I almost can see in my head, that's page 3. I know I'm about to get to that. I know that's what I'm doing, right? It allows you to listen, and it makes you help you pay attention. Practice makes perfect. So I am very lucky to run my practice with my best friend, who's an amazing lawyer and 10 times of a better crosser than I am. But literally this morning, we were playing out a cross of what she's going to have of a young lady who's 13 years old and a sex case that she's going to try. And I was throwing her some daggers, right? It helped her anticipate what we call sort of escape hatches or safety valves. Those are just the safe places that witnesses go when you're giving it to them and it gets too hot. So if you've role played and the witness does that or starts to cry or all of a sudden gets quiet, if you are experiencing that as the cross is happening, that could shake you off your game. It could make you lose your control. We don't want that to happen. If you practice, you'll be able to get some of that out, and when she starts crying, you will have known that was going to happen. You'll be able to take your breath, wait, let her adapt, and you'll be able to go right back into your cross. So if you can role play it, do it. It might not have to be the whole cross. If there's a difficult section, if I'm like, I'm not really sure if I like this answer or that answer, we role play it. And then that way I feel better so that if it goes either way, I've anticipated it and it doesn't mess up my nerves and allows me to keep myself in control. You want to make sure you don't use any tags or as few of them as possible. There are times where tags are effective to snap a witness back into control with you, but you don't need them in every question. So I've seen lawyers say correct at the end of every question, or right, or okay, or and at the beginning of questions. Yes, isn't it true? You don't need those. If you ask the question and use your tone in a way that makes it clear that it's a question, right? You don't need those tags. Police officers have become, dumbly for them, a little needy. They like to be funny and they'll wait and I'll ask a question and I won't have a correct or right at the end and they'll say, is that a question? Now, I'll just re-ask my question again, right? After a few times of them doing that, it never fails that a judge who's smart and knows we're going to will say, sir, you know that's a question, answer it, right? We love that because then, again, that establishes, officer, you're not in control, I'm in control. So as many of those that you could keep out, the better. Now, we're going to go to step 3, the execution. Shout out to Game of Thrones, literally probably one of my favorite shows ever. I wish that it was back on. Winter is not just coming anymore. Winter has came. We all know that happened, and Jon Snow failed me, but whatever. All right, so now we're in game time. House Stark forever. All right. When it is time for you to actually do the work to get up there, this is Brandy's favorite line, you need to check yourself before you wreck yourself. What does that mean, right? Check yourself for real. Check what image you're sending out. Are you jumping out of your chair and about to come at the witness and now everybody's like, what is going on and why is she acting like that, right? Or are you projecting a bad image as a messenger? So you want to think about your demeanor. You want to appear serious. This is not a game. We defend people's lives in what we do. So lawyers to me that come across too jokey in a murder case, that's probably not cool because people are like, someone died and you should probably be a little more serious about it. But I've seen some lawyers with certain witnesses pull that off greatly, kind of like that Columbo, messy kind of way. I want you to just think about it and think about if not only that message is what you're putting out, but is that appropriate message for that case? Does your demeanor support the theory of what you're doing? Our credibility is key. So this jury, in order to follow you, you're going to have to make sense. They're watching you for that. Think about your attitude. Do you come across too flippant? Is it assertive at the right places? You want to think about your tone. Some of us are naturally soft-spoken. No one's ever said that about me. I'm normally the loud person, but I really have to think about my tone, right? If that witness is an 85-year-old lady, I probably can't be yelling at her. If it's a 7-year-old girl, probably can't be yelling at her either. They give different sort of behaviors. You want to think about body language. Are you slouching or are you standing confidently behind the podium or in front of the witness stand? And appearance is real. I told you guys I love glasses and everything glittery. If you might see, I even have on glitter on my clothes. Everybody, though, in my courthouse tends to know when I'm in trial because I'm a lot more tame, right? Probably no sequins and probably not funky glasses until like at least day 3. But I'm going to ease them in, right? Because I don't want to be too distracting. I need them at that moment to be concentrating on my words and not on sort of my appearance. No, we said that, right? So again, commanding doesn't always mean loud, right? If you watch Game of Thrones, you know that Cersei and Tyrion's like shorter than me. He's like 4'3" or whatever, right? But he was always still commanding sort of in his presence. Cersei, very stoic and kind of regal. She could command the space without being loud. So you really want to think about what you need in that zone. Position yourself in the spot in the courtroom. Shout out in this picture to my sister, Lisa Wayne, who's an amazing lawyer that operates out of Colorado and San Francisco. I put this picture because the last trial that she won, I believe in Colorado, she moved counsel table. And she said, Judge, it's not fair that the government gets to sit so close to the jury. There's a way for both of us to kind of be close to the jury. I'm not saying you have to do that, but this is all about the cross and how you can control the situation. If that gives you a power seat in the courtroom and perhaps give you a power behavior in there, you might want to think about it. That person happens to be Darren Sharper that somehow Lisa managed to get him like 7 years for raping women while they were asleep. I don't know how she did that, but maybe it was because she moved the seats in the courtroom. Who knows? You want to think about what language you're using, right? All language has meaning, but that meaning can vary among the listeners. So are you calling a witness or your client a boy versus a man? Is no confusion too. We think about this in relation to race as well, right? And what people might feel if you call an African-American grown man a boy versus calling him a man. But sometimes we like that imagery. Sometimes we want that whoever perhaps the witness is to be a girl versus being a woman, right? So you want to think about those things. People are visual and define things based on their experience. So you really want to think as you're writing out your cross and choose your words wisely. No legalese. We have these wonderful degrees that we went and are still paying for, thousands of dollars from these law schools, but they teach us to believe that there's this special language that we're supposed to talk in. Stop it. No legalese in your cross. You're going to use regular words like you're speaking to anyone on the street. Not slang, for instance, unless it's necessary for what you're talking about, but just baby words. You know how the officers are always like, I stopped, the suspect alighted from the vehicle? I love when I'm like, so officer, you mean they got out of the car? Right? Just very simple. It also gives you the opportunity to control the environment. Your jurors and your fact finders will say, see, she's speaking regular language. I don't even know why these other people are talking like that. And that adds to your control. You also, as though you don't have 9 million other things to do, have to be listening and looking at the witness. Witnesses give off cues. They do body language things. They look down, they turn their head. Those are things that you might want to incorporate in your cross. And when I used to be a supervisor and I would go to watch my babies in court, they would be so into their crosses and they're looking down and they're crossing and there were beautiful questions, but they're not noticing that the witness is like turning in the chair or like looking at the judge or looking at the prosecutor like, help, help, help. Right? So you have to be paying attention to those things so that you can correct them. I love when officers can't answer a question and they look to the prosecutor and I can say, officer, you keep looking at AUSA Jones over here. Is something wrong? Right? It gets them like up back to me being the control, but you only get that if you're paying attention. Looping, right? Let's see.
Jim?
No, thanks. I'm good.
That's what she said. Pam?
My mother's coming.
That's what she said. Well, you always left me satisfied and smiling, so.
That's what she said.
So shout out to The Office. That's just a cute little way to think of looping, right? Michael Scott loved that phrase, and he was determined that he was going to wrap it into everything. And if we had let it play, he ends up doing it to the point that people are like, enough already. So my point with looping is sometimes you're going to get an amazing answer from a witness. You're going to take that and you're going to loop that right onto the next question. So perhaps the witness says like, yeah, I was there and your client, the victim was extremely drunk. So you might say, when the victim was drunk, she was falling all over the place. When the victim was drunk, she fell and grabbed the gun first, right? You might just take that and roll that into the next question. Don't do it for 15 questions down the line unless there's some strategic thing that you're doing that for. And if so, I'm still going to be like, they got it at that point, right? But you want to think about that. That also only comes if you've been listening to the witness and have caught that good answer. I've seen lawyers not be listening. The witness gives something beautiful. And because the lawyer is so focused on what their next question is, they mix it and lose that gem and aren't able to wrap it in. Oh, I think I have to go here. Okay. Pay attention to their words, right? Witnesses sometimes use the words that they are comfortable with, and I don't have a problem taking those and using them as long as they're not harmful. So the best example that I can think of right now is I was saying that a complainant was very drunk, and a witness who was testifying said she was stinking drunk. Right? So I took that. It wasn't the word that I had practiced, but I liked that word. And stinking for her, she almost sort of, when she said it, like sniffed a little bit, like he was stinking drunk, right? And it was like, perfect. I love that for my theory. And that advances it. So if a witness gives us something and it's not harmful, you want to pay attention to those words and use them where it's helpful. Adapt and adjust. I think I mentioned earlier, you're going to have all these sheets of chapters. You've spent days practicing and doing well. And then this witness gets up there and then the surprise to the government actually gives you everything you want. Just because you wrote out that cross question doesn't mean that you have to ask them all, right? That's why chapters work. There are literally times where I had 12 chapters and the witness was so good on direct, I pulled out 6 of those and put them to the side and didn't even use them and just pulled out the last few things that I needed. Because what happens is kind of that phrase of like, don't poke the bear. If you keep going back over it or you do it and they've gotten that good answer and it's out there, they're going to realize something's something's probably wrong and they're going to want to change that, right? We don't want to give them that opportunity. So you need to be able to adapt and adjust when necessary. Watch your pace, as you can probably tell from being on this call. I talk really, really fast. And so in my role prep, sometimes I have someone say to me, stop, like breathe a little bit, reduce your speed. Your questions might be good, but we got lost in them because you were going over them so fast. A lot of times these cases become like movies in our head and we can recite the facts like it's nothing. Your fact finders haven't heard these facts before. Your fact finders haven't spent time with these theories before. They're taking it in piece by piece. So if we're going too fast, they won't be able to catch it. So make sure that you're watching your pace. You have to know how to impeach, right? We all took the little classes in law school where they teach them and you're like, what is this? It's so important. Someone who can't impeach, it messes up what you're trying to do. Remember, impeachment is a way that we control. But if you don't do the impeachment right, it's lost. So I'm a fan of writing out the impeachment and making sure that you have the source that you're impeaching with right there. So for me, as I'm putting a file together for someone, I put all the documents that relate to that witness in that file so that I have a set with them with my questions, so that when I'm marking and showing opposing counsel and then reading from page 7, line 9, it's right there. And I'm not messily looking on my desk and trying to find it from when I used it with the last witness, right? I also like to actually sort of do a blurb in my cross of what the actual impeachment is. Because remember, impeachment is supposed to sort of be that point for point. And we could talk longer. That's why I have this line about DeMarca. At some point, you guys might want him to teach you actual impeachment because he's amazing at that. But you want to make sure that you're impeaching the right thing, right? Witnesses love to say, that's not what I said this other thing. So you got to make sure that your impeachment is spot on or have a reason, right? So if you're impeaching maybe by omission, that you're like, well, ma'am, the grand jury asked you who all was there and you never said Nikki was there. And she's like, well, they never asked me. But you know that's what the question meant, right? When the prosecutor was saying. So you need to make sure that your impeachment is clean and there and practice it. Make sure you have it ready. We've talked about this a little bit about not asking the ultimate question. For time's sake, I won't show the clip, but we all know the clip from A Few Good Men, right? Where he just kept pushing him and he goes with the whole, well, you know what? I'm just gonna play it because I kind of like it.
Colonel Jessup, did you order the code red?
You don't have to answer that question.
I'll answer the question. You want answers?
I think I'm entitled.
You want answers?
I want the truth!
You can't handle the truth! Son, we live in a world that has walls, and those walls have to be guarded by men with guns. Who's gonna do it? You? You, Lieutenant Weinberg? I have a greater responsibility than you can possibly fathom. You weep for Santiago and you curse the Marines. You have that luxury. You have the luxury of not knowing what I know, that Santiago's death, while tragic, probably saved lives. And my existence, while grotesque and incomprehensible to you, saves lives. You don't want the truth because deep down in places you don't talk about at parties, you want me on that wall. You need me on that wall.
Shout out to Jack Nicholson. Like, he is so good. The reason I like that clip, right, is the lawyer was so amped up. He was like, I got him. The judge was like, you don't have to answer. The witness was like, let me answer. And ended up giving, not that it worked out for him in the end, but ended up giving this like powerful speech, right? That will happen with bad facts. That will happen with like you pressing out the victim of some horrible assault and you're like, and you never told the police person. And the person's like, you know why? Because I was dying. I was on the ground. I was literally about to die. Your client was standing over top of me with a gun. And all that work that you have put in will be useless and gone. So no questions 13s, ultimate questions, whatever you want to call them. You want to learn to quit when the going is good. Okay. All right, Zoom. Okay. Did I do this right? Hold on. Uh-oh. Oh, there we go. All right. You also don't want to ask a question if you don't know the answer to it. You will have spent so much time in that brainstorming session that everything you're asking, you basically know. Why? Because a bad answer, and people get into it and they start saying, I just told the witness I saw he wanted to play. I was like, well, tell us what happened or add your actual forms. Nope. Stop. Let's not do that. It can destroy your case. It also might fool around and let a witness get into something that you spent all your time in pretrial motions keeping out. And now the judge is like, well, you opened the door. How many times have you heard that? I've heard that more than I want to hear. So they'll be like, you open the door. I'm going to let in what you spent 2 weeks litigating to keep out. So don't push it, right? It can also change the momentum of that case. In Good Men, he was kind of winning and going, and then Jack Nicholson was like, I will suck all the air out the room and change a lot of those good facts. So you're only going to ask questions that can make the witness give you the answer that you want. This isn't the time for play. And remember, we're advancing our theory, so no need to go off the rails. You could play and watch movies and play with that later. Sometimes, as lawyers, we don't know how to shut up. I think for whatever reason, we think that if we don't ask a question, like everybody will be like, take their check. Why are they here? Why aren't they saying something? Sometimes you can actually tell the story through no questions. It's amazing when a witness stands up on direct and says, no, I was there. I actually didn't see anything. I ducked my head and I ran away. Maybe I'm like, I like that because that's what I've been saying everybody else was doing and every other witness is trying to act like that didn't happen, right? Think about strategically if there are ways that you could just shut up and be quiet. Because sometimes you tell the story through just saying those 2 words, no questions. People have asked, well, what about if a witness goes rogue, kind of in that Jack Nicholson way? Now, he edged that on, so he got what he got in that scenario. But what if you have just a difficult witness or a witness who goes rogue and just sort of rambles? There are many suggestions on how to deal with this. This picture up, you'll see of a woman sort of putting her hand out. And I use that because I had seen many presenters at Amazing, who are amazing lawyers, say that's what they do to witnesses when witnesses ramble. And I said to them, I can't do that, right? And they were like, what do you mean? Yes, you can. I was like, did you forget that I happen to be like a 4'11" Black woman with like locks? And when I do that, it could very easily be thought to be me being dismissive or sassy. Now, I don't care about any of those things in my regular life. But when I'm in a courtroom and it's not about me, and it's about what I need to present for the client, I don't need any distractions. It's not about me. It's about what I'm doing for them. So I don't do that. If a witness is rambling, I simply just stop. Silence is often very painful for people. And people are like, oh, wait, well, she's not saying anything. She's not reacting. If they keep going, I might walk back to counsel's chamber and table and act like I'm picking something up. And then just re-ask the same question that I was asking when they started their rambling, because you did not answer my question. And I'm in control here, so we're going to do this my way. When that happens, you will often see judges say to a witness, ma'am, I know you know. Just answer her question, right? Because that's all I wanted. I never, as a side note, ask a judge for help. I don't need their help. I can do this. I'll stand there 8 times until either he's going to tell them the answer, because I'm never going to ask them for their help. So you want to think about ways that you can interrupt. Now, it is possible that maybe with a kid, you could say, honey, okay, right? And then move to the next question. But you want to think about it, and you want to think about who's in your jurisdictions, who you practice in front of, and how it might appear. So here are some chapters. I just wanted you guys to kind of see what they look like for a snitch in a robbery case, all right? So let's just assume that we had spent time, we had brainstormed, and these were the chapters that we had come up with that we were going to use. So one of my chapters is going to be about him lying to the juror, right? And how would I prove that in my mind? I'm going to go through his complete criminal record. I'm a huge fan too. I like to get into the weeds of it, right? And be like, now you got convicted of like theft, right? Which is what you stole was like a bike from somebody's yard, right? Check on your jurisdictions. Some jurisdictions don't let people do that. DC thankfully does, right? Because I'm like, that is what he pled to. I got the docket. I see it right here, right? But that I am emotionally giving the jury something to be like, he was in somebody's yard, like stealing, gross. Next chapter being that his story doesn't make sense. So what things am I going to talk about with that? Well, for instance, in this scenario, for those facts, it's like he offered somebody a ride. Then he waited outside for that person and then let the person into his car, though he suspected that the person had went to go get a gun. That's ridiculous, right? My point being that doesn't make sense. So I'm going to cross on those areas. I'm not going to say at the end after I do all that. And so that's because your story just doesn't make sense. And that's a question 13, ultimate question. We're not going to do that, but we're going to do everything to build up to it. We're going to look at how the facts he tells stories and lies to stay out of jail, very closely tied to bias, right? Because again, I'm trying to show what his relationship is with the people in this case, right? And who he is somebody who has a relationship with this prosecutor and with sort of this courthouse and detective, and he'll do anything to kind of keep himself out of jail. So you might want to talk about like how he's lied maybe to them about his identity, any bench warrants he had where he promised the court he would return and he didn't, things that sort of build it up about his lying. And then lies to the police to get paid, perhaps being another chapter, right? About how he was an informant, how he continued to get paid. He could still get arrests while he was working for them and they didn't revoke his bond. He's been out on the run, sort of all these things. All of these are what we do in the brainstorming. Before I've even started writing the questions, this is often what my brainstorming sort of result is. It's where I've come up with what these chapters are going to be. So here's an example of how it looks when I break it out, right? So let's say we're going to cross on the area of you offered Mr. Vega a ride somewhere. Remember, I just take you back. That is under my bigger chapter of his story just doesn't make sense. So you might say, now, sir, according to you, you heard him threaten to kill the decedent. Under your story, he said that he was going to shoot someone. So you drove him there. You let him go in. You didn't call 911. You didn't ask anyone else to call 911. Instead, according to you, you gave him a ride to the strip club, stayed with him all night, right? I'm literally screaming, that makes no sense. Don't believe him. He's an idiot, right? But we're not going to do it that way. This is also reasonable in a way for people to take that in, right? A juror sitting there like, well, maybe he was scared. Maybe that's why he didn't call 911. But then they're like, but wait, you went to a strip club. You're going to be able to close on. Ladies and gentlemen, if he wanted to get in touch with somebody, it was 90 people in the strip club. He could have went to the bathroom with his cell phone and called 911. He could have did this. He could have did that, right? And you might have more chapters about things that he didn't do. But the idea is to paint that picture visually for them. And this is just an example of how you can do it. With a police officer, you might just be able to spend some time, again, focusing on first how to bring out the bias relating to them, right? How to make their connection to this case, who they are and who they want to be perceived as, real for your fact finders. So, officer, you've been a police officer for 7 years. You started your career at the police academy. A police academy is where you first got training. At the academy, you were trained to be a police officer, right? And they trained you in many different subjects. He has no idea where you're going. Your fact finders are slightly interested, like, well, what did he learn? I would like to hear his. He's thrown off because he doesn't know, right? You were trained how to do many things, and everything you were taught at the academy was important. You were trained in some law, right? The criminal code, like what are crimes? You were trained in traffic code, right? What are traffic crimes? You were trained in what the Constitution, right? The laws that take care of all of us were. You were trained to shoot a firearm, how to do your job safely, how to investigate cases. The good part of this, y'all, he's not going to say no to any of this, right? You have lulled him right on in. How to handcuff a person, how to arrest a person, right? How to testify in court. You could literally, with a police cross, take time bringing out all these things because, again, maybe with this, you want to be informational as opposed to immediately being confrontational, and that'll give you some time, right? Oh, so that's also simple. So that is it. That is how you could cross. We have advanced cross at other times and whatever, but I hope with some of those basics, that is a way that you can walk in, use your theory, be controlling, be commanding, and save as many people in this world as you can. Thank you.